Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Diet Time is here. That's right, we're talking Dr. Giggles, still on Kill by Kill. Well, greetings and salutations, Internet. It's your old pal, Patrick Hamilton, coming to you once again from Moorhigh, California, which is not a real town and does not appear on a map despite anything you see in this movie. This is the Kill by Kill podcast, where we are dedicated to celebrating the least discussed component of any horror film, the characters. We're going to unpack all the goriest of details of Dr. Giggles in the hopes that a heart-addled teen's death is just the beginning of the jokes that we can make at their expense. And as always, there is only one person I trust that if I need to learn how to give a saxophone a blowjob, she will give me a lesson. The one, the only, Gina Radcliffe. How are you doing today, Gina?
Hang on, I'm unrolling my giant novelty Band-Aid to
thank God you have it. I didn't know where I had placed it because I have so many large pockets to place them in my doctor's coat.
Yeah, I just carry one around in case anybody asks, hey, you want to talk about Dr. Giggles?
I have so many questions about that novelty Band-Aid. Literally, I have paragraphs, but we'll get to that. I don't want to alarm you, Gina, but we are not alone. That is right. We have a special guest. Not only is he an Emmy Award-winning writer for The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, but he also hosts one of our favorite podcasts of all time, The Flophouse, on the Maximum Fun Network. He is partially responsible for us knowing one another. The one, the only, Dan McCoy. How are you doing today, Dan?
I'm all right, thank you. I will warn you, I am currently at quarantine levels of gin. So I probably will need, I watched Dr. Giggles a week ago, and I'm relying on you guys to spark my memory of this thing, because at the best of times, my memory is poor. I think it's because I have sleep apnea and I cannot form new memories while I'm asleep. Plus the pot edibles I've been using to cope with the dissolution of the world.
Acceptable.
Although I was just talking with other friends over Zoom, and we were discussing Dr. Giggles, and my girlfriend started saying what the plot was because she happened to be in the room while I was watching, and I was like, no, my friend. This is the plot to Dr. Giggles. So I guess some rudimentary part of my brain still absorbs horror movies very well.
Well, I mean, the plot's pretty simple. A psychotic. Is he actually a doctor? I don't think he's received formal medical training.
No, he has not received formal medical training outside of the Dr. Giggles Medical Center in which he was raised for the first 7 years of life.
But there is a tossed off line early on about how he's a genius. And that was one of the fascinating things to me about watching this movie, was just the notion of finally, the two threads of Hannibal Lecter style genius serial killer and teen slasher cross in this film in a way that I honestly don't know that I've seen elsewhere.
No, it combines the quipitude of the Nightmare on Elm Street series, but without the baggage of the whole Freddy was a child murderer who now you love. We always sort of battle against the origins of Freddy. It's hard to square that circle so much, especially when you get into later iterations of the package. And now he's become a full-on child molester. And you're like, this isn't making it fun. This doesn't make it happier. This doesn't make it scarier either. It's just gross.
This is one of the first movies I've watched for this podcast in a while where I was just gleefully laughing through most of it. I mean, that closing line that he says, I was just like, yes, he said it. He said the words.
During quarantine, I've taken to reviewing every movie I see on Letterboxd in a way that I never did before. I would use it as just a tool to log what I saw that year, because, it's nice to have a list that you can look back on. But now I'm like, what the hell? I don't have any other time. I'm going to lean into pretending that I'm an actual film critic. And I gave this movie 3.5 out of 5, but I led with the idea of look, I'm probably overvaluing this movie by possibly a whole star because because it is precisely the thing that I want out of a movie most times. Just like a silly, dumb, but like not like too winking horror movie.
It absolutely lives up to the title, Dr. Giggles.
Yeah.
Because that's, you're overselling your movie just on that alone. Because there's so many horror movies that have really wonderful titles, and then they just completely bungle it into being like a huge disappointment. I was just gonna say, no, this one lives up to a ridiculously entertaining name like Dr. Giggles.
Yeah. And I do want to clarify, when I say too winking, I use that very like the slimmest of margins. This movie winks a lot.
Yes.
But it stays on the right side of the divide in my mind. It doesn't turn into like a Sharknado or something like that.
No, I think it has higher aspirations. It also has the benefit of being directed by someone who is competent with a camera. Like there's intention going on here. Of course, it's not Taxi Driver, but it's not trying to be. It's trying to be the best Dr. Giggles it can possibly be. And for the most part, it hits those marks. For whatever reason, as irritated as I became with Freddy's quipitude towards the latter half of the franchise, there is more care given to his doctor puns here than anything in the sort of 4, 5, 6 era of Freddy. And as a result, like he clears the bar he sets for himself.
Yeah.
And also, there are genuine shocks in this section of the movie. For I had seen it originally in theaters, improbably, and the only thing I retained was I've seen this movie, and then it hit a certain section of this film, and I literally yelped so loud that my dog awoke from its slumber.
Yeah, I think I said the words, how did I forget this out loud?
It's just so improbable that this went down a memory hole when the elements of it are so memorable. I think just because it went away, it and any steam it might have gained sort of got lost in the era of Scream. It's just not that kind of slasher. It's much more of a throwback. And so as a result, it hits a weird wedge where it's just not quite remembered. And it also hasn't had a revival for whatever reason. Hopefully we can lead that. I think we push the ball a little bit with Hello, Mary Lou Prom Night 2. And I hope we do the same with this one.
It does end pretty definitively, too. And I know that's never really been a problem for horror movies. But for a non-supernatural character to basically be killed 3 times at the end... Like, it beggars belief that he would come back. That's one of the problems, I think.
Oh, and of course, if this movie had been successful, there definitely would have been a Dr. Giggles 2.
Oh, definitely. Yes, that's certainly true.
In fact, I had to think for a moment. I was like, was there a Dr. Giggles 2?
I did look it up because I was like, oh, did Larry Drake do this again? And then I'm like, no, that's Durant. That is his Darkman villain that he reprised multiple times.
Which he suddenly transforms into a Darkman at the end of this movie. But I feel like we're getting ahead of ourselves. Dan, where was the first place that you saw Dr. Giggles?
That would be, there was a... Jesus, I wish I could remember the name of the video store in my hometown, and I just can't. It was an independent store, hole in the wall, but it was the first in my small town. I grew up in a town in Illinois that was 3,500, I think, when I was the population when I was a kid. Now it's leaped up to around 5,000 or 5,000 plus. But that was the first video store. Eventually, we had 2. Very bustling, but I never watched it when I was a kid. You know, I saw the title Dr. Giggles, which is of course immediately gripping, and the VHS cover also, you know, very enticing. Like here's the thing, I was trying to think about how I got into horror movies, because I don't think it was a huge part of my youth necessarily. Other than I remember very clearly my brothers forcing me to watch Poltergeist because they thought it was amusing that I was scared. And then like Aliens was a movie that I watched over and over and over again. And I would, you know, like I had this little When I was a kid, I wanted to be a filmmaker. I had this Fisher Price camcorder, which is now like it's sort of a collector's item because people use it for art products. Art.
Where you like recorded off a cassette tape?
Yes, it was a cassette tape.
Oh my God, that stuff looks great.
Yeah, people use it for art projects now, and it's like this cult item. But I had it, and it came with a tiny like television that with an antenna. So for the first time in my life, I had this tiny black and white TV of my own in my room. And I remember watching Return of the Living Dead on this tiny black and white TV hidden in my room, younger than I should have been watching it because I had this secret TV. So there was some like attraction to like monsters in my childhood, but I think I didn't become a full-fledged horror person until later because I was too much of a goody two-shoes. And then later in my life, it was like, okay, this was the thing that was forbidden to me. And now I'm an adult and I can dive into it. But I don't think I saw Dr. Giggles at the time. And in fact, I hadn't seen it until you guys asked me to be on this episode. And I'm like, finally, an excuse to see Dr. Giggles. my life has been leading to this moment.
We opened that window for you, and your life has changed.
That's right. Use that Ghostbusters gif of Annie Potts hitting the button and standing up and saying, "We got one."
Yes.
Suddenly, a resurgence of Dr. Giggles. I can sense the reboot happening any second now. So let's get back into it. And of course, the best way to do that is to remind everyone who is still left alive at this point in the movie. Too many people, unfortunately, but let's start talking about them. Let's start with Corinne. She's the charter member of the Moore High Hillbillies Recreation Corps. And then, of course, we have Max. That is Jennifer's boyfriend. Well, less of a boyfriend, more of a boy foe.
Yeah, it is absolutely unacceptable to me that he lives.
Oh, my God. Not only does he live, but the ending shot is them kissing. You're like, how the fuck did this happen? We're going to get into all the details of why Max should A, be dead, and B, definitely should not be in a romantic relationship. He has issues. But let's then talk about Corinne's sort of toady. That would be Normie. She's a person.
You looked that up. They didn't mention her name once in this movie.
It's in the credits. Her name is Normie, Normi. And I know
Normie is a sociopath. The movie doesn't explore that, but she definitely is.
She's definitely trying to hurt people. And as far as a character is concerned, that's her greatest standout moment. Otherwise, she's just like a person who definitely paid SAG dues to be in this movie.
And she lives? I think she does.
Oh, yeah. She
like
stays out of harm's way.
The last we see of her is like she's got this sort of psychotic smirk on her face when she's telling where to find Max.
Yeah, and then she just disappears from time because the movie has too much to do. We also have officers Magruder, and Wrights. One of them is too old for this shit, and the other one is too young for this shit. You decide. Yeah. And finally, there's Dr. Evan Giggles Rendell. He's not laughing at you. He's laughing with you. Or at least with your dead body.
We also eventually learned that he giggles when he's nervous. He giggles when he's in pain.
Yes.
He giggles when his house is about to explode.
He's a real Joaquin Phoenix's Joker when it comes to giggling.
I had the same note. Is Joker really ripping off Dr. Giggles? Is the origin story of all the movies it rips off. No one mentions Dr. Giggles, and I feel like that is a lapse in everyone's journalistic responsibilities.
They both do have that sort of very unnatural, high-pitched giggle, so it's possible. It is possible.
To support your conspiracy theory, no one is talking about Dr. Giggles, so they're like, you have to ask why. You have to.
Fingers crossed. Yet. So let's return to the action inside of Moore High, I guess Moore High School.
Moore High School.
Moore High School, which is different than Moore High Junior High. This is where the best action set piece in the entire movie is taking place, and that is Corinne giving a full-on blowjob to a saxophone.
Which, as I pointed out in last week's episode, that's not how you play a saxophone.
Yeah, no, I have to back up Gina here. As a former clarinetist in middle school, that's not going to get you a good tone to do it that way.
She's looking for a tone, just maybe not produced out of the saxophone.
Yeah.
That being said, in terms of sax sex, between this and Fulci's The Devil's Honey, it's been a big couple years for brass wind instruments used to seduce people.
I'm just wondering, like, why the band room was universally decided to be like the orgy parlor of the high school.
Now I gotta step in. I've got opinions on this matter. My theory back in high school was that the very popular and attractive people are always going to find one another. And then the true, legitimate weirdos are also going to find one another. It's the vast middle that has the most problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew for a fact that, as we called them at the time, and I feel bad about it now because like they knew what was up as far as I'm concerned, but as we called them at the time, the band geeks were fucking. They were, sorry for, you maybe need to bleep that, I don't know, but like they were.
No, not here.
No.
They were indeed the ones in high school who were totally orgying out the band people. That is my sincere conviction.
I can tell you with great authority, it wasn't the theater department, because absolutely everyone in the theater department was questioning something to the point where they knew they wanted to use those parts, but they're not sure how, and they're not sure why. And I don't know.
Or who with, or, you know.
It's a dream. Someday it'll happen, like being on Broadway or learning really how to tap. But I think the reason why the band room becomes so sexualized is because everyone wants to rub one out on a linoleum floor. I mean, that is the best medium for great sex. Cold 50s era linoleum.
Where you have like the music stand right behind you. I was so hoping that somebody, not necessarily Max and Kareem, but somebody, they would roll over all sexily and then like just hear like this like crash of like cymbals because they just knocked over something.
Just the domino effect of every single music stand going down in a row while people were almost about to do it. Oh.
And then someone comically, falls and their butt lands inside a tuba, I mean.
I don't call that comedy unless you define it as divine comedy. Sure. It turns out that much like a film we covered many years ago, Friday the 13th, Part 4, we have a game of sexual chicken happening between Corinne and Normie. One of them is going to do it, God damn it.
Yeah.
And they're pushing one another and pushing one another and pushing one another until one actually gets a chance to have sex and the other one goes, I resent you and I resent this whole fucking game. And they try to burn everything to the ground. Now in Friday 4, like that person gets stabbed outside with like a hoe or a spade. I can't even remember what. It's in Shadow. But here, Normie just wanders outside to the fair and it's like, oh, I know how to fuck this up. I'll find Max's actual girlfriend and tell her what the fuck is going on. And then I'll get to go home with Corinne. I guess that's her motivation. I can't tell you.
Yeah, this is, I think this is to the point that you were referring to earlier and that we will get to, where this boyfriend character, we are expected to be a little easier on him than I'm inclined to. Now, look, am I going to say that people at that age need to make a commitment, a firm commitment to a partner? Right. Not necessarily. I'm not going to go that far, but in the context of Dr. Giggles, a 92 horror film, I am not inclined to sympathize with the boyfriend character who cheats on his heart-diseased girlfriend at the earliest saxophone oral sex he witnesses.
Yeah, the whole trajectory of him jumping from one girl is because she said she wanted to be alone.
Yes.
Not that, I need to go think about our relationship or maybe we should spend some time apart. She says, I have a heart condition. I'm not handling it well. I need to be alone. He's like, well, guess I'll go make out with this other girl then.
That's my cue. Oh, wait a second. Your mom died from a mysterious medical condition. She went into surgery and she never came back. I mean, if we're not going to fuck tonight, when are we? This has to happen.
But you see, I have needs too.
You're not. Yeah, I'm thinking about your heart, but you also need to think about my penis. What my penis is going through. What my penis could be going through.
Yeah.
Back at Jennifer's house, Dr. Giggles has just finished up with poor Tamara's ice cream filled tummy, and he finds the portable heart monitor, and he finds a new raison d'etre, right? This strikes to his mommy issues as opposed to Jennifer's, where his mom died of heart failure, and so he is going to rescue Jennifer the only way he knows how, and that is try to kill her and then revive her? I don't know. It's not a really thought through plan. He's not a planer per se.
I do think this is an interesting structure for a horror movie where the slasher character's motivation changes like basically exactly halfway through the film, where early on he just seems to be your run-of-the-mill homicidal maniac with a theme. One of these guys is like, okay, well, I'm gonna be a killer, but I need to have like a thing that's my thing, guys. And he's like, okay, doctor. But so he's just randomly killing teens, and then halfway through he's like, yeah, but I want to kill teens with a purpose. This one, strikes my heart.
I mean, usually I'd just be cutting them up, but now I have a higher calling.
Yeah.
I kind of like it. It takes the revenge element. It's not, the revenge is still there, but he's like, oh, I'm going to put the brakes on revenge. Now I'm going to kill people on the side, but towards a purpose.
Yeah.
And it adds a drive to it that I think would have just been sort of empty if he was just sneaking into teenagers' beds and cutting their penises off. Not that I don't enjoy that. I do. I enjoy it very much. But we do get a great look at Jennifer's past. We see that she's had several trophies. She's apparently been a track star at one point in her life, but she also has a Coke can wearing sunglasses and Walkman headphones. And
that there, Patrick, that's a dancing Coke can.
If only we could have seen it dance.
Do you remember the dancing flowers? Like they kind of did that little I'm not even on video. I'm like sitting here like tilting back and forth.
I believe you.
No, that was a dancing Coca-Cola can. I actually wrote that down. If you weren't going to mention it, then by God, I was.
The whole point of the show is to mention it, Gina. So Doc Giggs decides he's going to help her with that heart condition in an effort to continue his insane father's work. So it's nice to see that runs in the family. Normie informs on Max and Corinne to Jennifer at the fair, and leads them directly to the band room where Max is finally going to get that fingering technique perfected until he's caught in the act.
Just taking her clothes off in a room full of people. It's weird. It's really weird.
There's the thing in Chopping Mall where they're all having sex in the same furniture store, but those are consenting adults. These are teenagers. Maybe it's just my high school and college and frankly, after college experience.
Yeah.
I always missed sex. Like I heard about it, like, oh, I'm at this party. And then I go in the back and I'd start, motioning with my hands and talking very seriously about MTV's The State. Meanwhile, an orgy is happening somewhere else. And I've missed it completely.
I mean, that's the thing. I'm not going to say this doesn't happen. I've heard tell of orgies that occurred even as far back as high school that I was not privy to at the time, which is, like the natural order of things. I assume that that's the case, that I'm not going to be privy to an orgy that, like later after the fact, they'll be like, oh, you should have been at the orgy. I'm like, well, invite me, motherfucker. But I think that it's not necessarily crazy to think that these things are happening. based on the rumors and innuendo I heard throughout my high school and college career. Who knows?
I never came across it. It never happened for me, but I don't live in regret. I'm thankful for the sex I had and for the sex I currently am having. So once this confrontation happens, Jennifer goes back out into the county fair, and there's a few things we need to talk about here. First of all, shout out to CNC Music Factory for that album cut. This is a great way for Universal to really merge their worlds. We got a Universal artist and a Universal movie and a piece of music that makes no fucking sense, with just a guy shouting in military boots and someone singing and someone else acting like they're singing. But the best thing I think this movie has going for it is that all the background performers here are dressed in their finest Let's Go to Cracker Barrel clothes. There's nothing Hollywood about anyone you see in the background of this movie. They all look like they just shambled out of their panel van and onto the set.
Yeah, I was counting the mullets in that crowd scene. It was, I got up to the double digits.
Yeah, there is a lot of Oakland Raiders caps in that background, and you can really tell that it is of a time. But Jennifer both sees her father looking for her and Max, so she decides to hide inside Lila's Labyrinth, which turns out not to be a Henson Muppet themed burlesque show, but just one of those carnival fun houses, I guess.
Halls of Mirrors.
This scene is crazy because if you look at the outside of this thing, it looks like the size of a trailer. And then it goes like full TARDIS on the inside, where like they walk through it and like nobody can find where anybody is. Somebody gets murdered in there. All they can do, they can just hear somebody. I mean, like you look at a scene like in It. Well, It Chapter 2, it was mostly it was supposed to be messing with his head, but here it's just like, how big is this Hall of Mirrors?
Not since The Man with the Golden Gun has there been a more elaborate funhouse than this. I mean, at one point, she's just tripping balls and everyone becomes four different people.
I will say, like, this is a cliche at this point, the Hall of Mirrors showdown. But most, for it being cliche, like most movies don't feel the need to do anything new with it. Mm-hmm. It's sort of weird. They're like, okay, you've seen this a million times before and here it is again. But this movie, this started out with, I think, Lady from Shanghai, the Orson Welles movie. I believe that was like kind of the origin of the cliche, and there was a lot more expressionistic than it normally is, and here it actually gets up pretty crazy. Like, it does not look like just a regular house of mirrors. It ends up just being a lot of camera tricks of things doubled but then like reflected beneath one another and like occurring in like diamonds on the screen and weird wipes. Like it's very phantasmagoric in a way that you kind of don't expect out of a cheap horror movie, I think.
I agree. I think that's what elevates this. It's honestly swinging for the fences. And that's one thing I really enjoy in a horror movie. Even whatever the results are, if you get up to the plate and you fucking swing for that ball, that's what I want to see. And I think this movie does that. It punches above its weight. And a lot of the times, like, it works. Like, occasionally it doesn't, but it's really trying, and I enjoy that effort.
Also, did Lady from Shanghai involve a giant novelty Band-Aid? I think not.
Yeah, that is wow. Where exactly did he purchase that, or was that also in that magical bag of tricks that he inherited from his father?
I want to imagine that he just won it at the fair. Just like, playing the game where you have to shoot the water gun to like make the balloon pop and all.
Yeah, he instead of getting that goldfish, he's like, what if I traded up from the goldfish to that comical Band-Aid? And he's like, we've been trying to get rid of that for a while. Here you go, mister.
Nobody's ever asked for this.
You look like the kind of person who would enjoy this. Not only do I want you to have it, I insist that you have it. That's my Carnival Barker character, everyone. Did you enjoy it?
He's been workshopping that for weeks.
Gina, I got a great bit. It's a Carnival Barker, but he just sounds like me. Do you like it? No, yeah. Definitely do that one on the show, she said. The person who manages to get that comical Band-Aid around the mouth and I guess die by asphyxiation is Corinne, whose jacket appears to be a denim vest with flamenco dancer sleeves sewn onto it. That doesn't save her in the end. Unfortunately, it is a wonderful jacket, but she dies, and this is the revelation to all the characters that they are in mortal danger. It's not just their teenage drama they're running from, and this prompts Jennifer to try to get out of the space. Jennifer makes a run for it, narrowly avoiding capture from a near inoperable emergency exit, and then takes a tumble into the woods outside. And there's one thing that needs to be said here, and that this forest, this redwood forest, is lit like a fucking stadium tour for U2 is taking place. I mean, we've come across some well-lit forests in our forays through Friday the 13th, but this one takes the cake.
Yeah.
I mean, like there are lights coming out of fucking everywhere. But luckily for Jennifer, she's able to knock Dr. Giggles out, or at least and they stop him. She runs back to her house and then sees the police car with Magruder and Reitz in it and almost gets run over. And then the cops immediately blame her for almost getting run over. You know, cop shit.
Yeah. I mean, like that's probably the most accurate thing in the movie. Ultimately.
It's very, very true. Why did you run in front of this car and not warn us blocks and blocks in advance? Because I'm in trouble, asshole. So let's cut to the Moore High Police Department where Captain Harper, a name that we're never told, but I learned from the closing credits, is making a ton of progress with a box of fried rice. Does he not know how to use chopsticks properly? He's made a very shallow divot in that fried rice container.
Yeah, this is another slash movie cliche of the cops that are either completely incompetent at their jobs or absolutely do not give a shit in any way whatsoever. Mm-hmm. It's just this is a particularly egregious example of that. Yeah,
they do not care about anything or anyone. And it really, really shows.
I love how Max asks the captain, just keep an eye on. He promised you to keep an eye on her. I don't have to promise to do shit. It's like, oh, thank you, officer. That's very reassuring.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, like back in the day when these movies came out, you were like, oh God, this is just a plot contrivance. These guys are such idiots. Like, why is this happening? And the more I have lived, the more I'm like, oh no, this is just a documentary about people who are lazy, who don't want to believe anything because it might mean more work.
Yeah, they found a way into the police department, and because of that, they have no way to get rid of them when they prove to be useless.
Yeah,
they're just counting their days till that pension kicks in.
Yeah. One of my favorite little tidbits, getting back to Captain, whatever the fuck his name is, Harper, was recently from the re-release of the 1979 Dracula, and how every other actor in it was warned in advance, don't get in a scene with Donald Pleasance if he has food in his hand, because he's a food actor. And that's how he makes sure that all his scenes remain in the movie, because he establishes that he has food and then they can't cut away from it. I'm like, that's kind of badass that he had this massive reputation and he managed to keep it up for decades and decades and decades. Also, the vampire laser sex in Dracula is awesome. God. Check it out. So let's get back to that police station. Here we learn that Reitz has kind of sensed that Magruder knows more about this whole Dr. Giggles situation that he's leading on. And this leads us to a wonderful flashback. I want you to sit back in your chair or just really make sure that your headphones are turned up for this, because this is going to go somewhere you're not expecting. I promise you this. We first of all get Magruder talking about he hasn't had a drink in 35 years. And now we're going to hear the story of why. He's drinking something called Mr. Moonglow, which I don't know what the fuck that is. It sounds highly proofed. Let's put it that way. Maybe a fortified wine. Maybe it's moonshine. For fuck if I know. But we flash back all the way to Lil Magruder. He's drinking alone in the station house. And this is just after the town's mob has killed Dr. Giggles Rendell Sr. And he hears a small giggle from the morgue. So he goes downstairs.
The child's got his father's giggles.
You know, he learned it like pot. I learned it from you, Dad.
Genetic giggles.
You know, inherited giggles. Yeah. It runs in the family. So a small detail about this morgue. Most morgues are kept cold because dead things smell less when they're cold. But this one is next to a The Shining level active boiler that is running at full fucking capacity. So that place is going to smell great by the morning. But it gets even worse. Normally, I try to make sure my notes are very cogent and express exactly what is happening in a movie. And then you watch a 7-year-old crawl out of a fucking dead body, and there's no way you can write that down, folks.
It's not he cuts himself out of it.
Yeah.
Was he timing himself with a watch?
At some point, he's turned into this little feral child.
Yeah, the giggles while he's all bloody. You know, I made reference earlier to my girlfriend getting the plot, like, not wrong necessarily, but like not fully, like, you know, imputing it the way that I would have to describe Dr. Giggles. But the central thing that she 100% had was that she was like, you remember, it's the movie about that kid that cuts his way out of that woman. I'm like, yeah, that's true. That is accurate. That is accurate to Dr. Giggles.
I am shocked that I did not remember that scene, because I definitely remember seeing this in the theater, and I remembered nothing about it. Like, nothing came back to me like, oh right, I remember this part. It was like watching it the first time, and I just don't understand how I don't remember this part.
Yeah, it is very memorable to watch a child cut their way out of a dead body and emerge with a smile that is gap-toothed because he's lost his 2 front teeth, and he's like coming out of it.
I wish there was some sort of like flashback to show how the dad explained to him what he was going to do.
I got a great plan.
Like the timing, the timing of this.
You ever read about the Trojan horse, kid? Well, stick with me here.
I'm gonna put this Timex around your wrist. When the alarm goes off at 10, you start cutting.
Yeah. That's right at the right time for the policeman to be terrified by you.
I mean, thank God the small child's years of cutting into teddy bears gave him the skill that he needed to cut himself out of a human body.
I wonder if he practiced inside of a large teddy bear. Like, all right, we're gonna do a dry run with this, son. Get inside of this teddy bear. I'm gonna sew it up, and I'm gonna give you a watch. And then when time goes, you get to cut your way out of that bad boy. And he's like, oh, you did it 10 hours later. You see, this is the perfect plan. Okay, now crawl inside your recently deceased mother.
I was really hoping he'd come out with like a little miner's helmet on or something like that. I mean, it had to have been dark in there.
Yeah, he should have come out and gone, it's me.
I just love that this was the father's plan to smuggle his child to safety, I guess. I mean, you would think that he would have like, I don't know, driven the kid to a train station or something that's like, no, I'm going to smuggle him out in his mother's corpse.
Ripped untimely from his mother's womb. Like that, seriously untimely, like way later than you would think.
It is a crazy plan, but damn it if it ain't. It's strangely very memorable and visceral right now, and yet I'm with Gina. I don't remember this in the movie, and I just find that crazy.
It's a wildly gruesome scene for a movie that up to that point had been fairly restrained.
I think they were saving it up for this.
Yeah, I think that was going to be the big shocker for the audience. Well, it worked. Job well done.
Everyone needs to see this movie right now. And you're like, about halfway through, you're like, it's fun, but what's so special about it? Well, a 7-year-old crawls out of his mom's corpse. Like, you don't see that every day.
And he's just giggling like he just pulled some weeds and handed them to his mom as a Mother's Day gift. Just like, look what I did.
I put saran wrap on the toilet. Also, I'm going to climb out of your corpse. Boy, I could talk about that scene all damn day. But let's talk about the Campbell residence, where we find Cliff DeYoung, and he finally arrives to give this movie some much needed sex appeal. He's ambushed by Dr. Giggles. The message on their answering machine, I guess Dr. Giggles listens to one message and then adds another message without a phone. I don't know how it works. It's Dr. Giggles. Listen, a kid just crawled out of a corpse. Everything's up for bid.
Is this the scene where the messages look behind you? I'm right here, or whatever the hell that is? That takes a lot.
He's like, I'm right behind you, or something like that.
That is a lot of work. That is commitment to setting up this kill for a man who you are killing him, so he appreciates it for a couple of seconds. Like you're like, oh, I'm right behind you, and he turns around terrified, and he has like 2 seconds of appreciation for your craftsmanship as a murderer before he dies, and there's no one else there to see it. You can't like Dr. Giggles can't turn and be like, hey, did you see what I did there with the answering machine? That's not the way it works.
So as noted, Dr. Giggles manages to slice open Cliff Day chests with a bone saw. And moments later, Magruder, always a day late and a dollar short, manages to arrive, draws his sidearm as soon as he sees Cliff Day passed out on the floor. Dr. Giggles then stabs Magruder in the back of a neck with a scalpel, and then he then trips and falls onto it, basically adding both injury to injury and insult. There's a lot of blood on the floor.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, back at the police station, Max and Wrights are doing internet research on not even a dial-up computer. I don't know how this is happening. But during the scuffle with Magruder, Dr. Giggles has been shot. And so he returns to the Giggles Medical Center, where it appears that he has hoisted multiple mirrors onto the ceiling with a series of pulleys and ropes. Like he's the fucking Phantom of the Opera.
This is a much better like self-surgery scene than the cesarean section in Prometheus.
I like that scene, Gina.
I like that scene too. I just said this was a little better.
Well, this is more lo-fi.
She's not wisecracking through it all.
Yeah,
that's very true. There's rarely a pun in there. I better xenomorph through this. I don't know. Listen, that would be a first draft. I would punch it up and 2 in the 3. But so yeah, he manages to pull the bullet out and sew himself up. Good for him, because doing that in reverse through a mirror. I mean, he has not been to medical school, but he does appear to have genuine medical training and skills.
Yeah. Well, it's that psychiatric hospital library he's spending so much time in.
That's right. Mm-hmm. And so, Wright, speaking of which, Wright's managed to track down that he has escaped from a mental hospital, why he was committed, and discovers that he is broken out. And meanwhile, at the same time, Dr. Giggles uses that poor guy's whose throat he slashed in Volume 1. He uses that guy's car phone, and he pretends to be Jennifer's dad and learns that Jennifer is now at the doctor's office. So let's now move on to some swell KNB effects group makeup gags, because this is probably the worst moment effects wise in the entire movie. Jennifer has a dream in which she thinks Dr. Giggles is in the room, and then he cuts her open, to her heart, but her heart appears to be just below the surface of the skin. It's just like,
hey, say what you will. They understand anatomy and where the human heart is located much better than Glenn Danzig does.
oh yeah, Druncula from Veronica definitely knew the location of the heart, even though Glenn seems to believe that a heart is connected to a body through a series of garden hoses.
Wait, hold on. Now, I may be one of the few people in America who has seen Veronica twice, because I saw it for our podcast, The Flophouse, and I saw it for my friends have started a bad movie night on Mondays during this quarantine over Twitch, and it was a mystery movie to kick it off, and it turned out to be Veronica, which I've seen before. So I've seen it twice. Which one has the heart ripping or whatever is being referred to? Because like it seems like I should know at this point, being the world's, I think, number one Veronica expert.
It's the third one, the one in which Glenn Danzig thinks the audience does not know what a vampire is.
Yes,
that movie. Well, I don't. You've probably already talked about it. It's just that segment is insane with the degree to which Danzig's like, okay, just hold on this. Yeah. Now another thing that we're going to hold on for a long time.
You can actually see it in people's eyes.
Yeah.
Like when she's in front of that mirror.
Oh, God.
She looks back through the mirror to where you think the camera is and where you assume Glenn Danzig is, with the intention of, we're going to stop soon, right?
Yeah.
And these are people who perform sex on camera for a living.
I mean,
and they're like, we should stop filming this now.
Well, that story is a short. Like, this is a trilogy of shorts. And yet, in the third short is possibly the least amount of story I've ever seen in a film.
It doesn't so much have an arc so much as a dash. More of an M dash, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
It doesn't really. It starts with here. There's this lady who bathes in blood, and by the end of this, she's still bathing in blood. All right, good night, everybody.
You've confirmed that is her thing.
Yeah, that is. I mean, as I said, well, this went out to our Patreon listeners, but I'll say it here. That last segment to me felt like Glenn Danzig was given a gift certificate for horses. And he's like, I know exactly how to fucking use this. I'm going to get some horses in here. And you know your one dog who looks like a wolf? Bring him along. And they shot everything outdoors in like an hour. And he's like, well, the rest of this movie we'll just form it around this footage. And there you go.
That is the cutest, sweetest theory that Veronica could ever inspire. I like that. The very animal-centric theory of Veronica's third segment.
The only thing that was brought up on ours that didn't really make it to yours, and this came from Josh Hollis, who brought Neil Breen into your life, is that it was that at one point Glenn Danzig lived here in Los Angeles, and he put his quote unquote fixer upper for sale for $1.2 million. And the pictures are still online. And oh my God, the dire circumstances in which he was supposedly, quote unquote, in Dick Fingers living is part of your brain will leak out of your nose when you see just pieces of like a ceiling on the ground and just random toys stacked up against a wall. And you're like, he brought groupies back to this? Like,
oh, God.
Come on.
A gargoyle candle still in the box.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it's a lot of Todd McFarlane toys and his mattress on the floor, Dan. This is an adult. He had music video budgets. He goes on tour and he lives in a house with a mattress on the floor.
And a large-scale replica of the Tasmanian devil.
Living the dream. Yeah, no, that movie is crazy. All right, sorry, back to Dr. Giggles.
Back to Dr. Giggles. An actual motion picture with thought put into it. So Jennifer's at the doctor's office and she wakes up from this dream. And just in time for the real Dr. Giggles to arrive for some hot doctor on doctor action, as Dr. Chamberlain takes a pair of scissors to the back and then returns them to Dr. Giggles' thigh. This all ends up being a sort of sword fight between a piece of metal, and Dr. Giggles has an oversized novelty reflex hammer that he uses, and they sort of pull a Zorro for a good 30 seconds in the middle of this movie. Unfortunately, Chamberlain loses that sword fight and ends up with a comically large blood pressure cuff around his neck. And then we get a lot of Scanners era bladder effects as he suffocates and dies.
Was anybody besides me expecting that when it cut back to the other doctor, like his eyes were going to be like bulging out of his head, like when Arnold Schwarzenegger ran out of oxygen in Total Recall?
That would have been
I was waiting for that, and I'm like, or his head just like pop like a grape, you know? I mean,
yeah, this is off to the side, but I do adore the notion that at the end of Total Recall, Arnie's eyes can pop that far out of his head, and then he's cool.
He's fine. He's fine
after the
afterwards.
atmosphere normalizes. He's like, yeah, whatever.
His body operates in Pillsbury Doughboy logic, where you push in the middle and he woo-hoos, but then everything retracts when your finger comes out of the tummy, the way that oxygen suddenly, pressurizes Mars.
Yeah.
Boom, boom. Yeah, it all makes sense.
Fair enough.
Really, when you think about it. So Dr. Giggles then drugs Jennifer, carries her off across that very well-lit forest to the Giggles Medical Center, where in his surgery suite, there appears to be an active water leak. That does not bode well for the cleanliness of your heart surgery, but listen, he's the doctor. I'm not. We get some loose basement stairs foreshadowing here. That's going to come back. And Officer Reitz discovers in the waiting room of Dr. Giggles' medical office that there's been a kind of Voorhees indoor-outdoor redecorator body pileup. And I really appreciated that meme coming back. I love a good body pile.
Yeah, I like any time that a murderer just leaves a bunch of evidence lying around.
Well, it's best if it pops out at people at the best possible second. I mean, it's one thing to be clever enough to murder a bunch of people and get away with it. It's another thing to go, wait a second, let's use the whole buffalo. Let's use these bodies to give somebody a shock and surprise later on. Reitz isn't so much shocked or surprised, but he does throw up. So that's great.
I felt that would have been my first reaction, certainly.
We find that he's cut out all of their hearts in the hopes that one of them will be a good match. So he holds them up to her chest. He's eyeballing it.
Yeah, I don't think that's how that works.
No, but it's a very nice little, Goldilocks situation where it's like, okay, this heart's too big. This heart's too small. This heart is just right. But I do want to. So this is the point that I've been waiting for, because I when I watched Dr. Giggles, I could not restrain myself for the taping of this podcast before I could tweet out one goof I found on IMDb for Dr. Giggles. Under the goof section, it says, as a student of medical studies, even though he's insane, Dr. Giggles, Dr. Giggles,
that's quite a caveat,
should know that hearts are only viable for transplant for about 6 hours. And that's under optimal storage conditions, not a pile of organs stored in a bucket. So that is definitely a goof for Dr. Giggles 1992, starring Larry Drake. That's the number one goof.
It's the top one. Otherwise, this this might as well, be a documentary. It's so even-handed with everything, so realistic.
Yes.
The other thing is we don't know where he's been storing that bucket. He could have been storing it in a refrigerator. He might have a mini fridge down there for all we know.
Yeah, that's fair.
Come on. Wright arrives just in time after Jennifer's heart has been stopped by this machine that Dr. Giggles Sr. invented, which is meant to stop hearts. This was his plan, was like, the first thing we got to do before we transplant this heart, stop that heart. Then I can take all the live long day putting that new one in. No. That's not how heart transplants work. That's not how anything works. But again, outside of that bucket, this movie is really playing it straight. But so when Wright arrives in the room, Dr. Giggles fends him off by throwing a heart at his chest.
Wow.
And then pulls a Batman by disappearing into the dark. Just like, now you see me, bam, now you don't. And he's just gone.
Yeah.
So then Wright is like, revives Jennifer via CPR. And then it's like, hold on here. I'm going to look around for Dr. Giggles before we try to take off from here. And he exits into a hallway. And I'm sure at the time I originally saw this, I did not catch this. But he comes out of a door and you see a painted flat that has the sort of endless hallway behind him that is very off kilter. And this movie was not meant to be seen in HD. That's all I'm going to say. So then Max shows up. Fucking Max shows up out of nowhere. Like, it's time. It's Max time, baby. I'm here to help. And they managed to get upstairs, and Dr. Giggles has found his father's golf clubs. It says, a good doctor always knows the right tool for the job.
No. I think it's doctor. It's trying to do what doctors do best, and then it pans over to the bag of golf clubs, which I fucking love. That to me was the best gag in the whole movie. I loved it so much. That's like airplane level quality.
Yeah, I agree with you. Literally a couple of them fall flat, but a lot of them hit, which is way better than I think Freddy's average. Of course, Freddy had to do it over a decade long run, but they're not all going to be winners.
And Dr. Giggles never once uses the word bitch.
Yeah.
Yes. Never once.
I do like that you're asterisking Freddy's record. You're like, look, guys, Freddy's a legend. He had a long career. You got to take it, over it. Like, sure, Dr. Giggles is great, but he's like a shooting star. He blazes bright and then no more from him.
He goes out in a blaze of glory. And that's why I think it works that way, because they were able to use all of the doctor puns they had, all of the medical jokes that they had. But Wright gets the gun knocked out of his hand and has the least effective hand to 8 iron fight ever captured on film. He manages to take one to the temple and go through a glass door. And Max takes a smash to the forehead and becomes fucking helpless for the rest of the movie. So there's Max coming to the rescue, everybody. Clock it. The person who was dead just 2 minutes ago manages to help Max escape this fucking house for the rest of the movie. I mean, we've encountered some useless fucking boyfriends, but this one may take the cake, Jana.
There's no excuse for him to still be alive by the end of this movie. This is more baffling to me than the boyfriend still being alive at the end of the Halloween reboot. the boyfriend who throws her phone into like a punch bowl or something like that.
Oh yeah,
that somehow he is still alive at the end of the movie. That better be rectified in the next Halloween movie.
I definitely watched that movie thinking like, okay, this was a deleted scene. This guy died. And they're like, this movie's too long.
Yeah.
Yeah, he definitely earned a death, but strangely, he's alive and Max is too. I mean, at one point, though, those pesky stairs that we mentioned earlier collapse, and Jennifer helps him. She lifts him up. and then climbs over his back to escape Dr. Giggles. Like, oh my God, this guy is so fucking useless. I'm sure they thought this builds her up because she doesn't necessarily need him. She just uses him. But then at the end, they're fucking macking in her hospital bed. Like, ugh. So the question I have about the Dr. Giggles Medical Center is it was always in the basement, but have they always had that collection of bullshit outside of his office door? Like, did he invite people in and like, all right, just go down the basement stairs. Watch out for black widow spiders and the rusty nails on your way in to my doctor's office. Or was there a separate entrance at one point?
I didn't know he had a whole ass hospital inside his house.
He has multiple waiting rooms in a surgical suite. Apparently, some sort of what is, it's not cyberpunk. What is the one where it's valves and steam? Oh, steampunk.
Yeah.
He has a steampunk surgery suite. The only thing missing is monocles and a top hat.
Yeah, I mean, like he put a little work into the place. I mean, I was a little confused when I first watched this. The time, like the oh God, how do I put, like, I forget the word I'm looking for. The what followed one another. The time, whatever. I was like, you can cut this part out. Where I seem like a crazy person. When I seem like a crazy person.
Every ounce of it in. No, I don't edit this at all.
Okay.
Please continue.
No, what followed what? Because Dr. Giggles, like they don't know what happened to the kid for so long in the movie. But the movie seems to start with Dr. Giggles escaping and coming back to town. And so I was like, okay, what's the what follows what in this scenario? And then it wasn't until like later in the movie I'm like, oh, okay, this the D Giggles that checked into the sanitarium was a unknown person, so they didn't know. They did not connect these stories. They did not connect the story of the young boy who burst out of a child's or a woman's womb after she was dead, a son of a murderous doctor, with the murderous doctor that showed up on their doorstep, whenever.
Yeah.
But
he benefits from a lack of communication between police departments.
Yeah,
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
and clearly that smuggling his child out through a woman's dead body trick did not work.
No,
because
not at all.
Because he ended up in a sanitarium for some 40 odd years.
Yes. The timeline, that's the word I'm looking for. All this muddies the timeline to the degree that, like, okay, I don't know. Dr. Giggles set up a whole thing in his home. Whatever, it's fine. Like, he's a master of time.
You would think that someone escaping from an insane asylum and murdering 3 people along the way might have made the news. But no, they just, oh, here's something interesting. There's an escaped insane asylum patient on the loose.
Mm-hmm.
It was a different era. The 24-hour news cycle really wasn't in vogue. And so, it just didn't, penetrate the culture. It was a buildup to a big election. There were 3 people running for president. It was a different world.
Yeah.
Pepsi was something that people actually drank, Gina. It was a different time.
Mm-hmm.
So in the middle of a fight between Wrights and Dr. Giggles, Wrights gets a bone saw to his back, but he also manages to set fire to the surgical suite. And of course, in the surgery suite, there are tanks of oxygen. So we know at a certain point, if Dr. Giggles is unable to get out, he will blow up with the medical center. And he does, because that whole house goes kablooey right as Jennifer and Max are on their way out. Of course, Max is thrown yards. He is literally like a diehard escaping a fireball behind him. Cut to a hospital. Jennifer, her heart condition, of course, has become worse because of all of the stress, probably because she was dead only a couple hours earlier. And so they are going to perform that heart surgery on her. And she is put onto the surgery table with her help.
And honestly, I got to say, more fool me. I really thought that Dr. Giggles was gone at this point. And I've seen horror movies before. Guys. It seems like I shouldn't have thought that Dr. Giggles was gone, but we'd already gone through the thing where she was on the surgery table at this point, and like he was going to perform evil surgery on her, and she was probably going to die because he's a crazy person. You know, like that had happened. And so like he burns up. I'm like, great. Now she's getting her heart surgery. The fact that he comes back again to do the same thing, to then be also evil surgery number 2, genuinely surprised me when it probably shouldn't have. But like this movie kept going, I guess is what I'm trying to say, beyond the point where I thought it would end.
The best part about this is how long it takes the other doctor to notice that something's amiss. You've got someone who is like still smoking. Half his face is melted off. He looks like the Phantom of the Opera.
Yes, he's fully transformed.
And he's bringing out these like Cronenbergian-esque surgical tools. and the doctor's just staring. The other doctor's just staring at him like, well, this is odd.
Yeah, well, this does not comport. Like, are we going to? How does this? How am I going to list this on this person's, insurance form? I'm sorry. This is your second evil surgery. I don't even know the medical codes for that. That's why we need medical care for all, because evil surgery still costs as much as regular surgery. People, come on, vote for everyone. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. The good news about this trail of blood, we got 2 doctors with their throat slashed. We get a nurse who gets her neck snapped, and then this anesthesiologist whom they focus the camera on his glasses for an uncomfortable period of time. But it all has a point, because when Dr. Giggles shows up with with an insane array of surgical tools, it pays off. He has this one contraption where spikes shoot out, and this guy gets a batch of spikes to the face. And when it retracts, those glasses are caught up on the spikes. And you're like, oh, this person had a plan. Everybody, there was a point to seeing that man with his glasses on.
I do love that Dr. Giggles seems to spend a fair amount of his off time. I mean, like, I don't know how Dr. Giggles, breaks down his day, but some portion of his day seems to be devoted to like building medical like devices that can be used for killing, like things that look like they're old medical equipment but cannot be used for anything other than stabbing people. Like he shows up at the hospital with this whole arsenal of things that look like they come from the dentist in Little Shop of Horrors.
Yes. Apparently Dr. Giggles Sr., I think, also had a metal shop down there. Because there's no way he fashioned these things on the fly. And there's too much to it. Like there was a lot of thought put into this. So before she gets fully put under, Jennifer manages to rip the anesthesiologist's mask off her face, crawl out of the room. She doesn't get very far. She gets to a medical supply closet, but then she formulates a plan. Once Dr. Giggles breaks into the room, she throws a bunch of liquid onto the floor, and then uses the paddles of a defibrillator machine to electrify Dr. Giggles and a lot of cartoon lightning that looks fantastic. As far as cartoon lightning goes, this is excellent.
God. I mean, I know it. I know 100%. It's just nostalgia, but I wish we could go. I wish we could go back to a day where special effects artists just painted lightning directly onto the cells of film. And we had this cartoon lightning electrocuting our psycho killers. I love it.
I think nostalgia has a lot to do with it necessarily, but there is a charm to stuff like this with physical effects and practical makeup gags. it's a charm. I'm not saying it looks better. It all looks fake. It's the fucking movies. Like that train doesn't actually roll past the screen and hit the crowd that watched it in the first movie. Like it's all fake to a degree. So if you're going to do it fake, I kind of like the charm of it being handcrafted.
Yeah.
And not to say there isn't a lot of handcrafting done with CGI effects. It doesn't have that veneer. It doesn't have that artificiality sheen to it. And so my old man brain doesn't accept it as much with
Yes.
some rare exceptions. I understand that's a MP, not a YP for a lot of people.
Definitely. But that said, great cartoon lightning in this movie.
No, top rate. But here's the thing. This man cannot be killed. He wakes up from it. There's a great where he lands on his back gag, where you can tell that's a real stunt man who's put on pads. It looks great. Jennifer tries to cross over him, and he wakes up again. His first response while drooling is to say, "I don't feel well." And Jennifer's response is, "Take 2 of these and call me in the morning," and stabs him through the chest with his own insane surgical equipment.
His spring-loaded surgical equipment.
And cuts through him like butter. It's either the quality of the surgical equipment or between the fire and the electrocution, his body has softened a little bit.
It's like when you bring butter to room temperature, you know? I mean?
Exactly. Yeah,
He's been braised over several hours. He's falling off the bone.
He's been sous vide, just in a very different sort of way. Yeah. So he's very tender. He's fork tender, as it were.
And then we've got our "I see you shiver with anticipation" moment. I'm like, yeah. Oh God, yeah.
Oh man. And for those of you worried, Cliff D. Young is Cliff D. still alive.
Oh, thank God. I've seen that guy die in so many movies.
that sex on a stick, Cliff D. Young, still alive, still ready to give it to younger women. I'm sure in the sequel that didn't happen. He has a cool scar he can show off to the ladies.
And fucking Max is wisecracking about this situation. Yeah, what heck of a way to start the summer. All of our friends are dead.
Wah, wah. The round of funerals starts next week. Anyways, let me put my tongue in your mouth. She has just woken up from surgery. Let's make out.
So your heart works now, right? So like we can do it at some point, right?
You got a new heart valve. I got the same old dick. Let's see if these 2 things work. Oh God!
Why is he still alive?
Why is he still alive?
That is the only thing wrong with this movie is that Max is allowed to live. Other than that, perfection.
Yes, and it should be. I mean, listen, we've hated some characters. I hate this character. I don't hate this actor. I hate this character. It is a terrible character, and I do not like that he doesn't get a comeuppance. I just don't.
Yeah, the young cop should be the living character at the end of this, not this guy.
And if she wants to make out with him, fine. I'm open.
That would be great.
That would be great. Yeah, let's film that. Let's have an addendum.
The guy who actually tried to save her life. Yeah, that would have been. It would have been nice.
Like we cut to 10 years in the future, and they have a kid, and they still live in Moorhigh, and she teaches high school or whatever the fuck. Like that's fine. But this is morally reprehensible. So that's Dr. Giggles. But before we're really done with it, we have to do America's favorite game show that they don't know about because not enough people listen to the show. It's Choose Your Own Deathventure. And that is where we decide of the deaths portrayed in this section of the movie. If you were forced to die that way, which one would you choose and why? Up for bid today, we have suffocated by a novelty Band-Aid, stabbed in the back of the neck by scalpel, and then you fall on top of it. Strangled by a blood pressure cuff. Bone saw to the back. Getting your throat slashed. Having your neck broken. Steel pikes through the face. And of course, burned, electrocuted, and then stabbed. And Dan, as our guest, I turn to you for your answer first.
You know what? Look, here's the thing.
Sure.
Here's the thing. The parameters of this question assume that I'm going to die, no matter what.
Yeah, you are going to die.
We all die. It's just alligator.
We all die. So
we're not the first person to tell you that, right, Dan?
No, God, me?
Like this will be very awkward if you learned about your own mortality through this podcast.
But I'm the most important person.
And that's true. Never change, Dan. But I don't want to alarm you, but this is a fact of life.
Now, here's the thing. If the parameter of this is I have to choose one of these deaths, I'm less concerned with pain than I might be otherwise. Because look, at this point, all I can hope for is glory. So I'm going to go with the 3-stage death, which, painful though it may be, sort of makes me into a Rasputin figure. I feel like
your
like
legend
after
grows.
my death.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. People are like, oh, Dan, like you had to be burned, then electrocuted, then stabbed in the face with 2 types of medical implements, not just one thing, but she had 2 things, like one in each hand. That's what it took to take him down ultimately. So I think I would take that just for the rep that I would have afterwards.
Sure. Now, you do understand, as part and parcel with this, you will have to crawl out of your mother's corpse at age 7 without the use of your 2 front teeth.
You know what? Again, it just adds to the legend.
Completely understandable. I buy it immediately. Gina, what say you?
I mean, honest to God, you have to ask.
Yes, I mean that's one of the things we've worked on for 4 years on this podcast, Gina.
I mean, you do have to. In this particular case, you can't guess which one I'm going to say.
Let's see. I mean, you don't like pain. You don't like face stuff. I'm going to go with suffocated by novelty Band-Aid.
And you got it. Of course, a giant novelty Band-Aid. Come on.
Now, you're not going to be found with that novelty Band-Aid. Only you will know that you died that way. And the other person who witnessed this, their account will not be believed by the police.
Yeah, but I'll ascend to heaven in peace because I died in a thoroughly ridiculous way, wearing a thoroughly ridiculous outfit.
But based on Beetlejuice rules, you're going to have a lot of time with that Band-Aid.
I'm not a big talker, so it'll be fine if I have a Band-Aid, over the entire lower half of my face. I'll learn sign language. It'll be fine.
Well, listen, we're living in a world where we have to go outside with basically a bandage on your face. Anyways.
As long as I can figure out how not to fog up my glasses, everything will be copacetic.
I very much am looking forward to having a sort of the shadow-like scarf that goes around the bottom side of my mouth so that my prolonged artificial nose is very prominent. And people go, well, there's no way that's a millionaire playboy. And I'm looking forward to that. Of these, oh, good gravy. I think strangled by a blood pressure cuff.
Oh, really? That's like the longest one.
I love bulgy veins. Gina, like,
who doesn't?
It's just, listen, you can yuck my yum all you want, but that's the thing that I like. So there you have it. Before we go, of course, Dan, where can people find you on the internet and your shows and your stuff?
Flophousepodcast.com is where my own podcast lives. It's a podcast about bad movies. We came up with the premise long before it was a cliche. I do it with my friend Stuart, who is a hilarious gentleman who is also a bartender, although
America's party dude.
During this time of every social thing being closed, I guess he is a man of leisure, unfortunately. Yeah. And my other friend, Elliot, who is also a comedy writer, as I am by day. I am a comedy writer. The Daily Show, if you are still watching it, watch it. And you can find me at Dan K. McCoy on Twitter. It's impossible to read it as anything other than Dank McCoy. All one word.
And I would be remiss if I didn't say that to thank you, because the Facebook group for the Flophouse is where Gina and I grew to be friends. And it was a special time when it was very tiny when we became friends. But it is I still think it has many benefits and a wonderful place to involve yourself with pop culture and learn respect. God damn it. But I would be remiss to say how much your podcast means to the both of us. Honestly, it's a beautiful thing, and I thank the heavens for it whenever I get to hear it every other week. Gina, where can people find you on these here internets?
I am a writer for The Spool. That's thespool.net. By the time this episode goes live, I will have watched and written about the certain to be fantastic Josh Trank and Tom Hardy opus Capone, which as of a meeting with my editor last night, I asked to be assigned to, because that is the kind of masochistic personality that I have. I believe that will be somewhere in mid-May that should go up. I am also on Twitter under Porcelain72.
Do it today, people. Check it out. Of course, you can find us on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all that good stuff. We have Patreon. As we mentioned, the Veronica episode is up and it is fantastic. And we'll have a new one next month that will be a choice of our listeners. If you're of the appropriate level, please do that today. And so, unfortunately, that closes out Dr. Giggles. I wish it could last forever, but I'm glad it lasted as long as it did. So for myself, for Gina, and for Dan, the body count will continue.